What is the most petty but effective power move you have done? Our assistant manager has changed the schedule several times without notice, then happily tries to get us written up for being late, not showing up. I religiously document the schedule by photographing the screen, since we can't access it at home. After having to come into HR twice on my day off to prove the schedule had changed, I began writing her up for every single time change without notification. She is let off the hook because I'm just a peon, but she still had to walk to HR to dispute them. A few other people started doing the same. When she had to answer for 5 instances of it in a week, she was reassigned back to floor nursing on another unit. When I worked at a grocery store, I was in the meat department. We closed the counter at 8 and cleaned until 9. My dept manager said if we finished cleaning early we could head out, but he was 9'5", so he wasn't around. I worked there for some years, and as the years went on, one of the front end managers that did closing didn't like us leaving early. It wasn't up to them. They were not my boss. At some point they implemented a policy where we had to call the front desk and they had to come verify cleaning was done and sign off on it. The manager that didn't like us leaving early would say he was coming when we called, but then he just wouldn't come till 9 to verify so that he could keep us there the whole time. So my solution was, after I finished cleaning I would just walk to the front desk and find him, and tell him I was ready. He would say okay, be right there, and I would say okay, I'll wait, and I would just stand right next to him until he went to check. He hated that. Had the same kind of manager when I worked in the kitchen. Did the same thing. Always worked but annoyed the heck out of him. I worked in a call center that had a keycard security entry at all outside doors. My team supervisor was a tool who would penalize the smallest deviation from any rules, yet he ignored them when it suited him. One day when entering I realized too late that I had forgotten my keycard at home. A friend swiped me in. I was ripped a new one and told everyone had to swipe their own card or they weren't allowed entry, under any circumstances. Fast forward about 3 weeks later. Supervisor went outside to smoke on break, and left his keycard on his desk. It was heavily snowing and probably 5 below with wind chill. I went to the break room past the door he was banging on and ignored him. About 45 minutes later he finally entered the building and called me to his office and asked me why the frick I didn't let him in. I half-but apologized and said unfortunately that was against company policy. He had it coming. Hope he wasn't such a prick after that. My director had minimal respect for me, but our corporate office insisted I be a part of the management team. Meetings are held at a rectangular table. I knew he'd sit at the head, so I arrived early and sat at the other head. He had to face me during every meeting. I love it. Last day at a job. Been at the place for 5 years. Going round. Last chat with different folks in different areas. One guy who always tried to get a reaction from me. I walked up to him and said I never bothered to learn your name. Walked off happy. I was an MA for a very wealthy, pretty arrogant doctor. They'd regularly not finish or even properly code charts, which means we don't get paid for anything we did. Yet they never knew why we were losing money. They'd let the unfinished charts pile up into the hundreds and then task us with going through the notes on our days off while they sat at home, cruised on their yacht, or, my favorite, left the country entirely for a vacation. And they were a jerk to me and the rest of their overworked, underpaid staff. I was doing charts on their computer one day when I got curious and googled Medicare fraud. They didn't like turning off computers in the office. So evidently either I forgot to close the window or they checked their search history, because they seemed to notice this. For the rest of the time I worked there we never had to code a chart independently again and they were extremely nice to me. Now that I'm studying medicine, I realize that what they were doing was legitimately Medicare fraud and I just didn't know, lol. I learned that my manager hated me and wanted to fire me, but I was so good at my job and well liked by the rest of the company that HR wouldn't let her. I showed up on time every day and completely ignored her. I would take smoke breaks and chum it up with the other department heads. When I finally got a better job and could escape her, I gave her flowers. She was such a toxic bully. I've never encountered someone so deliberately malicious, and to this day I don't know exactly why she decided I was the main target of her scorn. I think it might be because I requested a day off to go to a wedding the second month I worked for her. After I left, 7 others quit within a month, 4 on the same day, and then the new group didn't last 3 months. And then she got fired. Frick you, you miserable C. Lost out on a promotion to leading hand, construction, to nepotism. Nevertheless tried to give the guy some advice when seeing some rookie mistakes popping up, which he promptly pulled rank and told me to follow orders. So me and the team complied with instructions to the letter, resulting in $500 K damage and the communications for a whole town cut off and the company nearly going under. I was also bullied out of a management position for nepotism. Guy drove the entire company to the ground in less than a year with many costly, fancy, but incredibly stupid ideas. I had a manager try to twist me into working on a day that I'd booked off for a family funeral. It was not a direct relative and I didn't bother checking the official policy about what I was entitled to, but I did mention when I booked it off that it was for a funeral. Nothing was asked about who it was or if I was okay, but I didn't offer any details. Anyway, manager fed me some crap about Friday not being ideal for time off and asked if I could work anyway. I said no, it was for a funeral. He pushed and I said I'd let them know by the end of the day. I went back to my desk, looked up the policy and emailed it to him. I said I'd be off Friday as well as Monday, as per the bereavement policy, which was 2 days if it was family, 5 if it was a direct relative. Beautiful response, and sorry for your loss. One of my former managers hated me because I was a robot who did their job and didn't want to attend pointless meetings every day to listen to her talk about weddings and babies when I had crap tons of work to do. That she'd ironically demanded of me. Anyway, few months down the line I caught wind that she'd asked HR for pay raises for the other 2 members of our team who did the same job as me. I thought this a little odd as I'd outperformed them consistently for over 6 months, but it was personal for her, knowing how incompetent and, quite frankly, dumb my manager was. I figured I'd be able to catch her out quite easily. As predicted, with a bit of digging around, I found an unprotected manager folder on a shared network drive accessible by the entire company, LOL, that contained a range of juicy documents including 1-to-1 meeting notes between myself and my manager, as well as my manager and other employees. The notes on me were ridiculously negative with zero basis. I discovered pay rise request documents and other sensitive employee pay material, which resulted in a data protection breach. Fast forwarding a few months, after I won a tribunal case against the company because they naively chose to try to protect her, and big payout, I found out that she had been demoted and is now working alongside the people she used to manage. I guess karma can be a B. The sad part is, I just wanted her to leave me alone and let me focus on my job. My old booziness partner tried to enforce a non-compete even though I was only doing residential work with the business I started. We had previously had long email discussions and arguments where he refused to do residential work and was very clear he was only ever going to do B2B. The non-compete got thrown out 5 seconds into arbitration. Sadly, I never got to use the emails I had saved. After we left the courthouse, I sat in my car calling every single customer I served when we were partners. Over 75% of them preferred my service over his and transitioned to my new business. I then called the only employee he had that actually knew what he was doing and worked hard and made an offer for what he was actually worth. His pay went from $15 HR under old partner to $25 HR plus monthly bonus plus paid training under me. The best part is that I had brought most of those customers on board his business, took all their calls, and did all the work for them. I didn't even think of calling them until he put the idea in my head when he was arguing with the arbitrator that I was trying to steal his business and thought, mother, I was the one who built that entire part of your booziness. I wouldn't have ever called them if he didn't try to screw me. Don't know about petty, but as a relatively new veterinarian I worked for a clinic where the head nurse, who was also the practice manager, hated me, referred to me as Doctor Fuckwit behind my back, though was all smiles to my face. Now it's expected that new vets are going to make mistakes, And what few mistakes I did make never compromised a patient. I made mistakes completing paperwork registries to her liking in a couple of instances, or leaving a difficult surgery for my more experienced boss to undertake instead of doing it myself, as I was not the most confident surgeon and didn't want to make a mess of the surgery. I found this out when she left her Facebook social media open on one of the clinic computers where she had an account that prominently displayed her face, so she was immediately recognizable, where she was publicly bitching about having to work with Dr. Fuckwit. The problem here was that 3 vets worked at the clinic, my boss being one of them, and she could have been referring to any one of us. I screenshot the forum posts, emailed them to my boss, and pointed out how this could be detrimental to business by reducing client confidence in the clinic, since she was easily recognizable from her Facebook profile picture and was working directly with clients at front desk. Boss was not happy about this. Straight up asked me what I wanted to have happen in this situation, since I was due to finish my stint at the clinic in a couple of months anyway, as I had spoken to my boss months before about getting a better surgeon in than I was, something the practice manager nurse was not aware of. I said I'm not particularly worried since I won't be working here anymore, but you and your remaining vets will be, and I want to continue referring surgeries to a clinic that clients have confidence in even after I leave. He also had taken the time to check client retention relative to each vet, and I had increased client retention by 30% during my 2 years at the practice. He fired her on the spot, and one of the more experienced nurses took over the job of practice manager. My last 2 months were a lot more enjoyable as a result. Stroke of good luck. Nice. My ex complained all the time about me not doing enough for her. I stopped doing all I was doing for her, and she apologized soon after when she realized just how much I was doing without asking for praise. I left her soon because in reality she wasn't doing crap for me. I'm totally hearing you here. I regularly butt heads with the sales team, so when I saw the sales director at the front door fumbling to get his access card out, instead of opening the door for him, I stood there and watched him struggle. It's a glass door, so he could see me standing 3 feet away, enjoying my coffee, looked him dead in the eyes and smiled. Man, that felt great. We had 2 managers who were treating people who worked in my department like crap, so I unionized all of my co-workers. It was a lengthy process, but once it was over, we started receiving overtime, better benefits, and better protections. Frick you, Maggie. We did go. We made over the income threshold. I was at a housewarming party for one of my best friends and his girlfriend. She had invited some of her friends that were doing basic training at the nearby military base. One of these guys took exception to me and would, throughout the evening, give me a shoulder shove with a little chin raise, like what you gonna do about it, B? Every time he did this I would move closer to him, each time a bit closer. Eventually I had my body pressed up against his side and I nuzzled my head into the crook of his neck. He jumped back and was like, dude, WTF. I told him, you keep touching me. I thought you wanted to be close. He stayed away from me the rest of the night. Power freaking move. I was recently moving out of a toxic living situation. When I sat down with my 2 roommates at the time to give them notice, I agreed to pay all bills up until 30 days from that day, as a courtesy, and to try and maintain some semblance of a friendship with the one I had known for 6 years. They started to nickel and dime me on everything and decided that they wouldn't give me my portion of the security deposit. So after I moved out a week later, they texted me for the rest of the bills. I did the math and came to the conclusion that everything I would have we owed would be less than my deposit. So I told them to just take what I owed out of my portion of the deposit. Felt good. That's not even petty. That's just fair. Why should they not give you back your portion of the security deposit? It's your money. I went to a Smash Bros tournament a few years back, and during one of the sets the kid looked at me and said, "Yeah, I'm pretty good at this game. I won the last tournament here, so yeah." I looked at him and went, "Wow, that's pretty impressive." Game starts. I frickin' bop this kid. Don't even give him a chance. Absolutely destroyed him in front of his squad. He tries switching characters. I bury that character 6 feet deep and win the set. I get up and say, "Good game," he says. "Dang dude, you're pretty good." Little did he know, I was actually the guy that won the last tournament. Straight inserted that kid into a garbage can. I was bartending and it was very busy, like Halloween or something. So the bar is several people deep and we don't have time to mess around. I ask a guy what he wants and he says what's good here, so I said I'll come back to you and turn to help someone else. So this guy shouts no no no. I'll do a well whiskey and coke, so I grab it for him and say X dollars. He asks what kind of whiskey it is, and I tell him. Then he holds out his money and when I reached for it he freaking pulls it away. So I threw his drink in the sink and said nobody serve this guy, and he ended up having wasted like 20 minutes waiting for a drink. Heck yeah, not a bartender. Big coffee. And I had some prick hand me his card but not let go until we had made the appropriate, in his mind, amount of eye contact. Freaking obnoxious. You bet your butt I did the same thing to him when I handed his card back. And he knew WTF I was doing. I work in IT, and I had this colleague that was both bad at his job and not willing to learn anything. He postponed solving tasks for weeks, blaming environment or other dependencies. I knew that he was just slacking, but I would have felt like a dong to go to the manager and tell on him. All the rest of the colleagues knew as well. One day I was assigned as a code reviewer for his task. That took 3 weeks to complete, even though it was a test that could have been done in one day. Apparently he just copied and pasted some test from another file, and of course it didn't do what it was supposed to. I went over to him and said I had some questions on the code he wrote and asked him why he has written a certain line of code. He had no idea what that line was supposed to do, so he just stared at the screen. His silence was so cringe yet so satisfying. He tried evasive maneuvers, like asking me what I would have done different, but I stood my ground and asked again what was his intention. I did the same thing for the entire code he wrote, and he just popped, started crying and saying he knew it was not good. He didn't confess he was slacking, but we were both aware, we both knew. I marked the review as incorrect. He got pulled in a meeting with the manager. 30 minutes later he came to me to ask for my help to complete the task. Shame he was too prideful to ask for help. It's a tough industry. Get help where you can. I worked at a supermarket since I was 16 and received my indefinite employment contract 4 years later thanks to becoming friends with the manager that was about to switch with another manager from another part of the country. So why not give him the contract? The team leaders and the new manager didn't expect me to stay there another 2 more years after. So basically the higher ups like their employees cheap. So they either hope that the older employees with an indefinite contract either leave soon after receiving the contract, or they give them the worst tasks possible and get them to go home according to the max hours given in the contract. Most of the time I worked 14 hours a week rather than 8, which is a nice thing for my bank account. They let me clean the bottom parts, racks of the refrigerated food sections with a sponge and water. It can get painful from the cold and shameful to see a 186 long guy basically sitting down to clean these parts. However, I started to get very talkative with the customers and enjoyed the chats I was having with them, and I got some gloves to make the work easy and comfortable. Also, I loved the faces of the team leaders when I told them I had to go home because of my max hours given, even if there was an enormous amount of work left. It was great to be back home at 9 PM and relax. I was working there for 9 years. 3 years of it consisted out of cleaning. Summary: higher ups didn't like it that I was so expensive to keep as an employee, so they gave me the worst task possible with the least hours possible. I didn't mind and I kept working there for 3 more years. This is one of the best power moves I have seen on here. Frick you. Not only will I do a great job, but I will like it. I hope your great attitude takes you far. Refusing to let a road rage emerge after they flip you off and honk several times. I was driving a tractor trailer and the guy passed me on the right and ran out of road just before a bridge abutment. Started to scream and honk at me to let him back into the lane. Nope. Also a truck driver. This is satisfying as heck to do to butthole drivers. I work at a grocery store, and one day on my way to the back after my shift ended, a lady stopped to ask me if we had any more of these packaged donuts with a better date. I said sorry, those are delivered directly to the shelf. What's there is all we have. She asked me to check in the back, so I repeated what I had just said. She then rolled her eyes and said, could you at least check? I said okay, went to the back, left out the back door, got in my car, and drove home. FFS. I've never worked at a grocery store, but even I know there is no stuff in the back for things that are stocked by vendors. Worked with this guy that I simply could not stand. He was terrible at his work. He was a terrible person. Everything about him was terrible. It was so bad that I couldn't be in the same room as him cause every word that came out of his mouth was so stupid and ignorant. He would hit on every girl in the office, frick up every single thing he did, and become very aggressive if someone tried to correct him. A few months in at work, me and another guy would email our boss every time the guy did something wrong. In the end he of course got fired. On his last day he knocks on my office, he sticks his head in and says, "I just got fired and wanted to say bye." So, bye. I said, "Hey guy?" He said, "Yeah." I flipped him the bird and said, "I got you fired. Go frick yourself." Mayo, I worked a temp job with a guy who was almost the opposite. He wasn't great at his job, but he was nice and likable and had banged like pretty much every girl in his friend group there. Pretty funny crap when they realized it, and provided me with entertainment in a mediocre job. My manager was a douchebag. IDK who hurt him, but he disrespected so many associates in front of other co-workers and customers alike. He would call them names, yell at them for not being able to complete impossible tasks, ridicule them in front of everyone if they didn't know something, etc. Nobody liked this manager, but everyone was scared to stand up to him. Brought down overall morale of the team. I was a lead and he liked me cause I was useful and never complained. But I hated his guts. He kept talking to me about how he thinks the generation younger than him, he's probably mid-30s, are all freaking stupid, and he doesn't trust any of them. My best friend worked at the same place and he was an easy target for the manager. That's where I drew the line. I tried reasoning with him that he shouldn't treat people that way, but all I got as an answer was pretty much I could care less about them. With that, I made my best friend call the HR hotline for corporate and wrote detailed stories with date and time of incidents. I also made sure I had other associates who would testify in our stories. A week or two later, HR people came for a routine check, but they actually talked to me and my witnesses. Later on we received news that the manager will be transferring to another store but didn't know why. In his last days, he told me how he'll miss me and how he was really glad he worked with me, but also jokingly slipped him transferring cause someone reported me in HR. Haha, that wasn't you, wasn't it? Haha, I said, what? You got reported? No, it wasn't me. Why would I? No. Technically it wasn't me, it was my best friend who you fricked with, so, bye. Sitting at a bar and a stranger next to me made a comment about something that was on my phone. It is worth noting that I used to be in a toxic relationship and he always went through my phone and looked at it without my permission, which I found obnoxious. I politely told him and informed him I didn't think it was polite to look at other people's phones without their permission and asked him please not to do it. I'd care if he was drunk or on butthole, but within 5 minutes he was staring at it again, so I did what I normally do in this situation. Google big dongs with herpes. Pull up an image and avert my gaze. Normally people don't say a word and just look away. This guy? I'd care if it was the dirty dong or the Malort he was drinking, but dude looked like he was going to vomit in his mouth and I thoroughly enjoyed it. If a similar situation ever comes up, teratoma is another suitably horrific image search option. Anyone else reading this and feeling curious, just don't. I accept no responsibility. I have a co-worker who's been on our job for 3 years now and he's still used to call me to ask about crap that he either should know by now or can read in our lists of methods, guidelines and FAQs on our online platform. I just stopped answering the phone the first time he rang, and then waited 15-20 minutes until I called him up with some bullzo. I was caught up in a thing and couldn't talk pleasantry, and lo and freaking behold, he had figured it out by then. Long story, so TLDR at the bottom for the short version. I worked in admin as an apprentice for a larger building firm. Now I was in a very small team which was just me and the manager of that sector. I enjoyed the job for the first year as I got on with other employees and the work was easy. Then near the start of my second year there was a switch in higher management and my manager got a new manager. Now this guy was the most spiteful ball of rage I've ever met. He brought his team over to our office as he was still managing them as well. Now when the transfer started I could tell things would be bad because I'd heard horror stories about him before, and on top of that one of his employees from his other team started physically shaking in fear because he hadn't met a deadline soon. after working with us. Now a few months went by and his wrath had mainly passed me by until the day of reckoning came. I asked our supplier if they were still operating or if they had halted because of a new regulation. Obviously this contained a good 5-10 minutes of shouting and name calling from said manager. A little note: at the time I was only 17. I think I handled it well, but I feel like other people my age might have been in a bad state after this stuff, he said. Now unsurprisingly, my manager, who worked directly below this piece of human garbage, went on stress leave after a rather long session of verbal abuse in front of the whole office, leaving me to run the entire sector by myself. Now during this time I was still under an apprentice role, being paid less than minimum wage but while also being put down as temp manager. So my official title on the employee list was essentially apprentice manager. At this time my apprenticeship was supposed to be up and we had to have a meeting about me switching to full-time employed, with higher pay and more holiday. That conveniently kept on getting pushed back. Now everyone there knew that my manager, the one on stress leave, was just going to stretch out his stress leave until he was just fired or just eventually quit, as he was planning on retiring anyway. The fateful day came when he decided to retire. 5 minutes after we found out, I walked in and handed over my resignation, leaving them without a single person knowing how to even remotely run that sector of the business. The look on his face alone was worth the 6 months of heck alone. TLDR. Dickhead angry director causes my manager to go on stress leave, leaving me as an apprentice to do his job on apprentice pay. Me quitting the same day as my manager, leaving the director with no one who knows anything about running that part of the business. Dude, you started 5 of 10 paragraphs with the word now. This one's pretty resent and petty and still fuming a little. I process lab samples to get them ready to test by techs. We drop off certain ones to a station. A tech grabs them and runs them through an analyzer. After that the tubes get racked in case of later testing. Specific tube types need an extra label because they aren't compatible with the analyzer, so they're poured off. A copy of the label is printed off for the pour off tube. So we started printing an extra label to take with us to save the tech a couple seconds. All you do is scan the barcode and the printer spits one out. Anyway, we've been ungodly busy because of COVID and technical issues. One day during at a particularly busy time, a tech comes up to our window asking us to print a few labels for her. Sure. Frick it. She was being a jerk, so no one wanted to bring the samples back to her, so I did. She came back again with another one, so I brought it back. When I did, I think I said something like, "We're pretty busy right now, so I apologize, we missed a few." Well, work on that. That said, do you know how to print a label? Her computer right next to her. Tech: yeah, of course. Me: do you mind miss occasionally printing off your own so we aren't sidetracked? We're really flooded with work. Her: how are we supposed to know you're busy? Whoever left this just left and dropped it. We're paid too much to print off labels. Now normally I can justify crap attitude from healthcare workers out of stress. But we're all stressed right now. And this woman doesn't even know the meaning of the word busy. All I said was, okay, well, either work with other departments or quit. I don't care. Thank you. Goodbye. Now whenever they or anyone asks for a label, I take it, follow them to their workstation, print off a label with their computer, which is right next to the analyzer, and bring the samples back around to their drop-off section. It's a huge time waste. You may want to see if IT can get a second label to automatically print when certain tests are ordered. We do that for our stuff. There's a few times where the person collecting puts both labels on the container, but it still helps some. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.